Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your reviews, your comments. We love hearing from each one of you. We are continuing the myths of sexual addiction, and this is part 3. Like I mentioned, after our last recording, it went a little over an hour, and we thought it would be best to split that up since there was so much information, so much really good content. We thought it would be best to let your brains just not feel so overwhelmed with all that we shared and all of those different things that we talked about. So, part 3 today, we're going to wrap up these myths of sexual addiction with Luke. But before we dive into the conversation, I want to acknowledge new listeners. Perhaps you are the one who betrayed and were asked by your partner to listen to these 3 episodes, or you chose to listen to them on your own. I felt it important to acknowledge the choice nonetheless to listen. Alana and I mention this all the time, how being open and curious and aware is half the battle. And as much as this podcast is mostly geared towards those who have been betrayed, in this series, we are hoping that the ones struggling with the behavior that is problematic can hear with curiosity and know that all of us at Choose Recovery are invested in couple recovery when the couple is choosing that, and that it happens with individual healing. So here is part 3 as we wrap up our conversation on the myths of sexual addiction. Okay. The next myth is I only have a problem if I get caught.
Oh,
By the way, this one's not a conscious thought. It's more of just a way of being. Like nobody is consciously going, I don't have a problem because I haven't been caught. And there's many people living by this.
I want to make an attempt, and a guys farther into recovery might value this a little bit more and can. Not that guys newer in recovery won't be able to see it, but just noodle on this one for a second. Okay, so what I hear this fallacy one is just to say that again. I only have a problem if I get caught. Alana used to bring this up. She used to say, "You got caught." What would you say, Alana? Do you even know where I'm going with this?
No.
Okay, she would talk to me about getting caught, so that means it doesn't matter to me. I'm only
Like,
sorry that I got
sorry.
caught.
Sorry you got caught.
Yeah.
I'm like, What are you talking about? No, I wish I wouldn't have done what I did. I wish I wouldn't have done. Believe me, I'm not happy about what I did." Totally different wire for her, different wavelength. And what is she talking about? And I think about 2 guys, one who gets caught and another guy who comes forward on his own, not like she's asking questions, okay? And he decides to share it straight on his own. He's in pain because he doesn't want to be living this way anymore. They are at 2 totally different places is ready to change, ready for change. 2 different stages. So if I only have a problem if I get caught, it's I'm not ready to see reality yet because I'm still out of it. But somebody that's come forward on their own
I'm not
is
ready to face reality yet.
what did I say?
You said see, which is still accurate, but that like face reality also means like facing the consequences of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like, Luke, how you broke that up to the difference between disclosure and discovery. That's one of the things that when we're working with betrayed partner is to get clear about, was this discovered or was this disclosed? Because it makes a huge difference on the consequences to the betrayed, the trust level. And I often find that when it's a constant discovery, we've got those abusive behaviors and communication happening, right? The lying and the deceit, the gaslighting and the blame shifting, because there's still this, I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get caught. And then, oh, I got caught. Okay. It's problematic either way, but I see this. I'm going to hide it until I get caught, or I'm going to hope that I don't get caught, or, right. It's way more problematic. I think there's a lot more damage in the
Yeah.
repeated discoveries that have to happen in order for the truth to come out.
So much damage.
Yeah.
That's the word that kept going through my mind is it's a greater impact
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the betrayed partner. Yeah. They're both.
And I think on both too, if we're going to talk about the one who is betraying, I think if you are waiting to get found out, then you're just digging yourself in a deeper pit of shame and hole, and it's just not helpful. So definitely a myth, definitely not a healthy mindset. And healthy would be like, okay, dig deep and disclose as quickly as possible. We've talked about before all this boundary that Alana, you had, and I keep mentioning it because I think it's a really powerful one, beautiful one. So if you are finding yourself relating to the constant discoveries rather than disclosures, and multiple of anything isn't helpful. But if you're finding yourself more, I always have to discover it. I think a beautiful boundary is that if you act out of sight of these value systems, boundaries of the relationship, then I need to know within 24 hours. I love that one.
One thing to look at is for the person, see how interested they are in tying and wanting credit to sharing information. And I think about the person that wants credit for sharing information of you got caught. No, I didn't, because when you asked me, I told you. And then, okay, I had to ask you 4 more questions. Yeah, but I answered your questions and I'm here, but she keeps dragging it out of him. And that destruction, and also that there's not that readiness or that experience. And I know for me, there's all the shame's tied up into it, all the shame. So I'm not ready to be open. So there's a big difference between disclosure and discovery. Just a big difference.
In active truth telling and passive truth telling.
Mm.
Because that's what you're talking about. That passive truth
Yes.
telling is I will tell once I'm caught. I will tell once you directly ask me just the right way. Like, yeah, you're telling the truth, but very, very passively. And that doesn't create anywhere near the same level of safety than when we're engaging in that radical honesty and that active truth telling on your own.
Yeah.
Which inadvertently we just uncovered another myth. Because I think that's another myth that, no, I did tell you the truth. No, you didn't. I had to drag it out of you. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's another.
It's, it's like why we involve professionals. Because the thing that I would share with the guy is, and I recognize this can be really triggering, or the partner, which is let's dig in and let's talk about what reality actually is. And there's a choice to be made of, I'm not going to be thinking about outcomes. I'm going to be thinking about truth. And so, for any of the men that are listening to this podcast, what I won't want you to do is say, okay, I've got to get ready for change. So, I'm not going to share anything until I'm ready for change. It's just, who are you going to share it with? And once you get that process started, it's a really big deal.
Which goes into disclosure that we're going to be talking about,
Hmm.
like why that process needs to happen sooner than later, why it's so important. The next myth, if my partner forgives me, then we can have things go back to the way they were and we'll just be fine. And underneath that, like a sub myth to that is, I said I'm sorry a million times. How many more times is this going to take for my partner to forgive me? So that forgiveness one, and I know we touched on this, Alana, in our betrayed partner myth, but I hear this from the addict is, if my partner would just forgive me, how many times do I have to say sorry? I've said sorry so many times. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah. It's interesting because we wouldn't bring this into actual real life. We wouldn't run up a debt, go to collections with a creditor, and then settle on the collection and then go, okay, that means that all possible lenders out there should just be okay with me because we settled.
Let me play off of this. I was just going to say there's such a difference between amends and an apology. And so I think of it like you're going to the creditor and you're like, I'm so sorry. And you show all the reasons why you're so sorry. And then they're like, okay, sure, you don't have to pay me back the $120,000. That's not how creditors work.
Mhm.
You still have to figure out a repayment plan, and they still are figuring out how you are going to repay that debt. And then, even then, there's still those consequences that come from it. They're not going to just go shovel out and give you a ton more money.
No,
Mhm.
now you have higher interest rate now the next time that you want to loan money.
And so that creditor still requires that repayment. And that's what I look at as the amend. Like, we want to just say, I'm sorry and have an apology, and then it's better. But then that bypasses the whole process that needs
Yeah.
to happen.
And that's what I think of. I believe it's misunderstood forgiveness. Forgiveness what I noticed with you, Alana, was that process of trusting myself again and forgiving, not forgiving yourself, but that peace that you made inside of yourself. And oh my gosh, for me to think that's about me and like that's going to heal our relationship, you get into a place of forgiveness, like I've done my work, doesn't make things better. That's something that you came to with your own hard work, but there's still a lot of rebuilding that is way outside of forgiveness.
And repair, yeah. It can be a lifetime and in the sense of forgiveness, and I think I mentioned this before, but I don't look at it as a one and done either. So I think just like repair is, I think, ongoing, so is forgiveness. And I think there's different pieces and chunks and aspects that you might feel a completion and repair around this area, but not so much in this area. So I don't even like looking at it as a forgiveness period done and repair period done. I think this is an ongoing experience when you're rebuilding a relationship from this damage.
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally.
And we said this in the betrayal trauma one, but just if you're only listening to this one right now, forgiveness does not equal trust. Those are two totally different processes. And we talk way more in depth in the betrayal trauma mess. So if you're only listening to this one, do go over and listen to more in depth around forgiveness there.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Next myth. Looking at pornography isn't that big of a deal. My partner is making too big of a deal out of this.
Yeah, looking at pornography isn't a big deal. How could someone clarify that? Because what we're actually looking at is the alignment and the consent about what the relationship consists of. And if one person says, this doesn't work for me, it makes it a big deal. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. So it's relationally destructive to be breaking the rules.
I can
Well,
see so many people rewinding that and listening to that again. Mhm.
and in my experience, the betrayed partners who are traumatized by it are the ones where it's been hidden and deceived and their reality has been altered. That's what takes it from being a problem with consent and a problem of different values to now we're getting into trauma.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
really the behaviors around it, that deceiving, that I see the most damage caused.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And to continue to quote Hope Ray's work, this is why it's betrayal violence because of what that does to the internal system as well as external when that has been hidden from you. And Luke, again, to reiterate what you're saying, I think that's such a good valid point. If this has been established as part of your relational boundary, and you know that this is something that was not part of what is accepted in the relational bubble, then it is a big deal. And so
Yeah.
I love how you frame that. And if it's not okay with your partner, it's a big deal, even outside of pornography, right? When we're just talking about healthy relationships and what we are allowing in our couple bubble, if my partner has a problem with something and is uncomfortable and injured, then it's a problem for me. And I take that seriously and I want to repair that.
Yeah, my body knows what to expect and responds to consistent and normal and repetitive at a foundational level in many different aspects. This reminds me of it's gonna sound like I'm changing the subject and I'm not, but just notice how a body responds to what we're thinking we're gonna get and not get that. I remember being a little guy and whenever my mom and dad would stay up late on a Friday night, it was their date night. They didn't have a lot of money, but they'd go get treats and they'd go get those things. And I would just pray that there'd be some left over in the morning because I was gonna go raid the what the leftovers were. And Alana, you know what story I'm gonna talk about? And I wake up earlier than everybody else and I go to the front room and there's a cup and it's got root beer in it, right? And I'm like, sweet, right? This is awesome. I drank it. It wasn't root beer. It was my dad dumped olives into a cup out of a can. It was olive juice. Okay. So my body knew what it was going to get, right? And it responded in such, I can just taste it like that's not what I thought I was going to get. You think about it, it's just a freaking cup of olive juice I thought was root beer. Imagine thinking you were getting something that meant everything, right? And your body responding, that's not what I thought it was. And like you said, trauma. We built something foundationally that we agreed on mattered. And the thing that makes it more traumatic is one person says something doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. So they check that and they check that and they're told over and over again, no, we're still on the same page. Yeah, we're still on the same page. And then they're given in a moment that you're drinking something different.
It's a great analogy.
And I'm so sorry that's disgusting.
Oh, it was nasty. It was nasty.
And I like olives, but that's disgusting.
The gross.
So that's such a good visual because I can just imagine that expectation of drinking something. We've all done that, right? The next myth is replacing one addiction for another. So, what I hear often is at least I'm not having sex with other people, or at least I'm not masturbating, at least I'm not looking at pornography. So, they're moving towards another unhealthy, problematic, addictive behavior, but justifying that to their partner because at least it's not this, at least it's not sex.
I I I think on this, I'm a little bit embarrassed, but in the beginning stages of my journey, and for moments, watching a partner get frustrated because their partner's like, and I'm worried. I think he's just doing some cross addiction stuff, and be like, well, he's not looking at porn. Why is that so upsetting? And I am embarrassed. That's some stuff that was coming up for me. And just read the book Dopamine Nation. What keeps us disconnected from the people we love is just being oversaturated with chemicals. And Alana and I often talk about this, but her and I have privately, maybe on a podcast, about me just being a dopamine junkie because you talk about a relationship with food. I couldn't get enough sweets. I couldn't get enough sugar. It was just intense. And it's really important to recognize it's not just a porn problem. It's a emotional mismanagement. It's a coping problem. It's just coping with, I got to feel good. And once you feel good, and you continue to tip that and look for more things that feel good, more things feel good, you don't have the ability to feel good anymore. And the
Mm.
only thing that can fix it is pain. And pain's important.
Healthy pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Healthy pain.
With this one, the replacing one addiction for another, I see partners find comfort in that. Find comfort of, I would much rather him being playing video games than me out wondering where he's at. And so I just want to give a little bit of validation to that, that if you do find some comfort of, he's here, I'm seeing something different, I am finding comfort in that. I don't want to take that away from that. And the skills of healthy living and healthy like dailies can help with all addictions, whether we're talking about gambling addictions or alcohol or food or gaming or pornography, whatever the addiction is, it is those dailies. It is that checking in with our emotions. It is those regular things that we're doing that treats all of it, all of that disconnection. And so if somebody is moving away from doing really extreme behaviors and they are still struggling with food, I'm not going to shame my client for that. And we're still going to be tackling it the same and building in those skills and building in the extra healthy living that will help them get more control in their life. So I want to highlight that. And then I just do want to give a little like side note. The amount of individuals who have sexual addiction and ADHD co-concurring or comorbid conditions is incredibly high. And we really do need to treat the ADHD because ADHD does include a deficit in your brain of dopamine. And so we have to find those healthy ways to be getting that dopamine. Otherwise, your brain is constantly starved for dopamine. And so treating the ADHD in conjunction with with any type of sexual addiction is essential.
Yeah. There's this part, Alana, I wanted to push back on a little bit, but then I just was aligning with what you were saying. The part that makes me nervous is about different addictions is because comorbid addictions or replacing one with another, I guess is what I should be saying, is let's say I switch from porn to cheeseburgers and I handle my way to life with cheeseburgers. There will be a time in my life when cheeseburgers won't mean as much to me because I'm oversaturated with dopamine, which means I need to find a bigger hit. And those neural pathways still exist because they never get to get rid of them. And that's the scary part. And that's not going to happen just like that. I'm not going to go from cheeseburgers to porn again, but it will be a process. So I just wanted to just echo and say thank you for acknowledging that there's a newer, healthier way of handling things.
Yeah, and thank you for
Cheeseburgers are real
bringing
healthiness.
yeah, the neural pathways is such an important piece that you brought up
Mhm.
because you're right. Those addiction neuro pathways don't disappear.
Mhm.
We just build stronger, healthier ones that becomes our default, that becomes faster. But we can revert back to those old ones if we're stopping that healthy behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my experience is that reverting doesn't happen quickly, it's slowly over time. This is the part that I forgot to bring up earlier, but it ties in right now, which is when I'm mapping out a recovery plan with a guy and it's his recovery plan, nobody else's, it's not mine, it's his. We'll talk about if you went back into old behavior, what pathway would you take to get back there? What would that process look like? And he wants to think it happens immediately. Like he slips and then everything back over again. I'm like, no, you don't go from, if we compare this to food, you don't go from 185 pounds to 225 in a moment. That's a process to get back there. So what would that process look like? So it's the same thing here. It's creating awareness and what do we do is to fill that hole.
Yeah. And it can be a slippery slope, but it's not a quantum leap jump. It is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing in a lot of this and what I've experienced personally too on the recovery side physiologically, neurologically from betrayal, this does lead into at some point expanding your scope of professionals to help you because this does include testing. I just did a neurological
Mm.
panel for my DNA and genetic testing, and it showed a lot of things, helps with understanding how PTSD affected me neurologically. Functional medicine can help with a lot of this stuff. There's so many resources now that help facilitate this kind of physiological and neurological healing. So I like that we're going here too, because it's so much bigger when we're talking about our human experience outside of the problematic sexual behaviors. There's so much under it, which is why I think that that myth of I'm fine. I've been sober a while. I don't need a help. Just gets under my skin because I'm like, oh my gosh, no. And even on the betrayed side of I'm fine. I've been doing okay. And you see sometimes Alana, like our clients will drop off and you're like, you haven't even got to the somatic part, right? You're going to be back in my office. And so this is when we can commit to this is a lifestyle change. I heard Jennifer Finlayson Five talk about this, like at some point using these experiences that just rock us to the core individually and relationally, using them and being able to look at them at some point as a gift to change, as a gift to grow, as a gift to see what we didn't see before and were blinded to before in our human experience. And so I want to normalize too that this is what we as humans are here to do to learn to grow from these types of injuries that we receive and cause. That's the growth mindset that we're always talking about. So it's so much more impactful when you're ready for that. But there's a lot of big things here. So yeah, I appreciate where you guys went with this in the brain
I
part.
love that.
Okay, the last one, and then we're wrapping up, y'all. The last myth that we're going to talk about is how relapse means that I'm back at square one.
Almost everyone I work with, it feels like square one for the betrayed partner and for the person who is back in behaviors. And just because it feels like it doesn't mean that you have unlearned everything that you have learned. And what you do with it really is going to be key with whether it is a tool for learning and growth or it is just simply a painful experience.
Then can you give a couple ideas of what that healthy response to a relapse would look like, because I can just hear our listeners going, okay, well, what does that look like? What does that look like? Lana, you used that analogy a long time ago about the rubber band.
Mhm.
You just share that one again.
Yeah, if you have an individual who's healing from triggers, you have this big explosion. And then as you heal and move forward, you move away from that. But then when you hit a trigger, PTSD pulls you back to that moment that you feel like you're back right when it happened and you're not. And then your brain's like, have to start all over. But in reality, you don't start over. You pick up where you left off and then you keep healing and you keep moving forward. And then when you get hit again and the PTSD hits and it takes you back to that moment, for those who can't see my hands, because you're listening to me, I'm smacking it back to my hand. Again, it feels like you're at the beginning, but when you work through that trigger, you don't start all over. You go back to where you left off, or you are still where you left off, really. You just don't feel like you're in the middle of it and you keep healing and moving forward. And I think about the acting out partner, if they can take what happened and show up differently and take time, Luke, you call it game tape, which I would love for you to explain what that is. If you can do the process around this, it can be such a tool for understanding yourself and your story and why you do what you do. If you choose to dig into it and face that hard pain.
Yeah, it's a lot of men that I work with. It's what gets in their way is their effed up relationship with failure, and the way they view failure is I need to hide when things don't go the way that I think they're supposed to go. So when a guy shows up, and I think about anybody that's been quote unquote successful, their learning that came from their failures and how they grasped onto those. Some pretty solid people that go, think about just like Thomas Edison is one example. How many times did he take to invent the light bulb? Like 1,000? I don't picture him the first time it didn't work, him running off in shame and saying, "What's wrong with me? I'm so stupid." He was like, "Okay, what am I gonna learn from that? What am I taking from that?" So we add this into it. What men will do is they'll build into their process, what am I gonna learn from my close call or my slip or my relapse? Because those are 3 different things. Slips, close calls, and relapses, way different. Okay, I'm gonna get with somebody, I'm gonna seek to understand what happened, but what led up to what happened, and what did I learn from that, and what am I gonna do differently? And that's a 3-part process. And that's not having such a effed up version or relationship with failure. I'm actually learning about myself from my experiences. And you have somebody that shows up with you and says, "Hey, I want to tell you about something that I'm not pleased about what I did. This is what happened. And this is what I learned. This is what I'm going to do going forward." It feels a lot different than somebody who's a mess that was just caught. It's a big difference.
And some of that learning could sound like I'm learning that I tend to act out when I'm feeling really lonely. Or I am learning that me taking my phone in my room to bed every night is when I act out the most. Or I'm learning for me, watching YouTube and just scrolling YouTube is a gateway drug for me. And so it's putting those pieces together and looking at yourself and understanding, or like, I'm learning that when I skip 4 days of doing my regular healthy things, it is so much harder for me to not act out of my values. Those type of things are the things that you can learn and practice and start showing up differently in. I'm going to rewind us because I wrote something down on my piece of paper. We were talking about I can control my addiction without professional help. And I wrote something down, and then the conversation was so good, I totally forgot it. If you have a spouse who has been acting outside of their values and their professional suddenly decides they won't work with them any longer, in almost every case I've seen that happen, it's a professional who will not work with somebody in addiction who is not doing the work.
Mm.
And I have seen betrayed partners talk themselves out of seeing the reality of that and talk themselves out of that experience or justify it or minimize it because that's a really painful truth. When somebody is really committed to doing the work and changing, I see coaches and professionals who are like, I'm with you. Even if you're messing up, even if you're not doing it perfect, if I see your heart is in it and you're doing the work between sessions and you're really trying to figure this out, I'm right here by your side. The times I see them say, hey, dude, I can't work with you anymore, not until you're ready and serious and doing this work, usually is because they're not doing anything in between sessions and then just want to use that time as like a hangout and catch up time. And we as professionals are not serving our clients well by doing that. By just hanging out with them, we're
We're
not
hurting
actually
them.
helping them. We're part of
We're hurting them.
enabling that pattern.
Yeah, can I tell you what that sounds like in real life? Or can I
Yeah,
share with you?
please.
So, I have the painful experience from time to time, stop working with a man, but I'll go back to, "Hey, in the beginning, you said what you hired me for, what I'm here for, and I won't hurt you by staying here if the progress isn't heading that area. If what you said you were going to do, and we don't need perfection at all, at all. What we need is momentum and the work that goes into those things." And yeah, it's pretty painful. And I feel for the partner because I never call the spouse up and say, "Hey, just so you know, I'm not working with your man anymore because of this."
Yeah, you can't, not for confidentiality.
Yeah. So it's not ethical. It's not right. And I have such strong feelings. And then I am reassured that her, because again, typically I work with men, of her ability to be able to look at all the pieces and not get that direct communication from me and be able to go, I trust myself and I recognize this doesn't feel right. But I won't spend time hurting them by not being present for them while not doing their work.
So I don't know what the myth is in there, but I think that's a really important piece to know because I've just seen it often enough. I think
Yeah.
about there are so many people who really do want to do the work, and we cannot fill our calendar with people who want to just hang out because that's not helpful to them. And that's not what we're here for. And so I
Can you
just
clarify the hangout, Alana? Because I don't think anybody ever just wants to hang out. Can you clarify that? Because I think that's important.
what I've experienced is when I have somebody who has been acting outside of their values and isn't in a place that they want to change, then they come with super trivial things that aren't actually any of the issues that they ever brought. It's more of, let's just talk about how my day went. Let's talk about the week. And we're not actually diving into any real work. When I'm trying to get into real work, it's deflected into just wanting to keep it really surface level, and no matter how many times I try as a professional to go deeper, they're not interested. And one of my personal boundaries is I will not work harder than my client. I will work side by side with my client. I will support my client, but I will not drag them through recovery or through their work because that to me is taking away the autonomy of my client.
Mhm.
So I won't do that. I will work with people who want to do the work. I will be an incredibly safe person and I will allow for that accountability. But I will not drag people into healing because that's not real change. That's not
Wh-
really.
What I've noticed for me with my clients, and just remember who I work with, typically the betrayer, or always the betrayer, is their hanging out version looks like trying to figure out how to convince or change or look at the other person's problems,
Mm,
how
mhm,
they need to figure out instead of that internal work,
mhm.
that
Yep.
empowering myself. That's what the hanging out looks like,
Yeah.
Mm.
um, for my clients.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I definitely see that too. And I love that you highlighted that. If
Mhm.
they only want to talk about what the other person is or isn't doing, instead of looking at where their internal work is and their locus of control is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And I see
good.
this both. I see this both ways.
Yep, both sides
I
being
think
trade.
the myth, if we were to create a myth around this, what I hear, whether it's from the betrayed or even the addict, there's just no professionals. He's been through so many professionals, and no one
Um,
has wanted to work with him, or no one will help him. Or on the, you hear this from the addict side, no. no one will work with me. No one really will see me or help me. And when you see the pattern of multiple professionals that they've been through, that's where I'm kind of like, okay, it causes for pause and getting more curious and asking some more questions around what's going on there. So I think there's a myth there too that I see my partners believe, like around the addict of they just have been through so many, no one has been able to actually help him and going into how the professional is actually messed up.
Yeah.
Because again, I totally know that there have been professionals that are not actually helpful. That does exist. I get that. So I'm not discounting, but it's always, if I hear that and it's multiple, it's always cause for pause and more curiosity.
Yeah.
Mm, mhm. Oh, Luke, thank you.
Thank you.
I just, again, anytime we're talking about the acting out behaviors, where they're coming from, mindsets, I know that this can be really sensitive for my betrayed partners. So I want to have empathy for that and make space for that and just encourage you to notice where the pain points are and to take some time and do some grounding work and then dive deeper into those triggers because triggers are pieces of information on where our healing work is waiting for us. Sending so much love as both sides are trying to navigate this journey. It is hard emotional work. So I just send love and support with that. And as always, thank you for hanging out with us this week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Be sure to check out chooserecoveryservices.com for all the available services to meet you where you are at. If you feel like you are ready for more, ready to take healing up a level or two, or get unstuck, then consider joining my Believing in You group coaching membership. Over the years, I've seen women get stuck in the healing journey, and they say things like, I'm doing all the things and nothing is working. Or I feel like I'm burnt out with all the things because nothing's working. I feel like something is missing. So I created a group coaching, not support group, but coaching for those who are ready to take it up a level to really see more into themselves, into their brain. I teach a tool and concept every week that you can choose into to help you in your healing journey. I was talking to my group tonight, actually, of how much I love that we have to choose healing because agency matters so much. When you've had choice taken, then choosing to heal is critical. It's not going to happen to you. Click the link in the show notes for more on Believing in You group coaching membership or go to the website. And as always, keep choosing recovery, choosing to heal, and choosing you. Take care, everybody.